Moving Lives Minnesota is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people, November 4th, 2008. Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for North Central Minnesota. Production funding for Lakeland Currents is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Online at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, friends. I'm Jason Edens, your host of Lakeland Currents. Thanks for joining the conversation, and thanks for your ongoing support of Lakeland Public TV. Every Minnesotan has a story of origin and migration. In fact, it's one of the things that we all have in common. Most Minnesotans, but not all, are originally from somewhere else. As a result, Minnesota is a culturally diverse state, and that both enhances and enriches our lives and our communities. As part of a statewide initiative by all the PBS stations called Moving Lives Minnesota, Stories of Origin and Migration, I'd like to welcome my next two guests. Adrienne Dorn is the Executive Director of Greater Minneapolis Community Connections, and Monica Segura-Schwartz is a Business Development Associate at the Latino Economic Development Center in St. Cloud. Adrienne and Monica, I'd like to welcome you both to the program, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
having us.
Well, first of all, Adrienne, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to learn just a little bit more globally about what Greater Minneapolis Community Connections does. And please bear in mind that most of our viewers are in central and north central Minnesota. So how does your work affect Greater Minnesota?
Yeah, well, Greater Minneapolis Community Connections, we are formerly known as the Greater Minneapolis Council of Churches. And so we are a social services agency based in Minneapolis that has been around for about 115 years. And so we've done a variety of social services programs for community in that time. One of our longstanding programs and efforts is Minnesota Food Share. Minnesota Food Share is a program that was created in the early 80s in response to federal funding cutbacks under the Reagan administration that really necessitated the food shelf system that we have today throughout Minnesota. While we don't have our own food shelf in Minneapolis, we do partner with almost 300 food shelves that are all over Minnesota to help with capacity building, advocacy, and in particular, raising food and funds during the month of March through our March campaign. And our 40th annual March campaign is actually coming up in 2021 in the month of March. And so that's really our big investment in the region is through our food shelf partners and in addressing food security. And it's something that we've had a longstanding commitment to.
Interesting. Well, speaking of origin stories, I had no idea that Greater Minneapolis Community Connections was 115 years old. What is its origin story? Why did it start?
It started over a century ago with largely from congregational volunteers, folks who belonged to the variety of churches that really were looking to do good in their community. And like I said, have done a variety of things in that time, including support services for the elderly, youth mentoring programs, starting in the 80s, food security programs, and also a lot of social justice and equity work during that time as well.
Interesting. So Monica, I have kind of a similar two-pronged question for you. I'm wondering if you can tell us just a little bit generally about what the Latino Economic Development Center does, but also I'm curious about how that work affects Greater Minnesota.
So Latino Economic Development Center is an organization that was born actually out of the Mercado Central in Lake Street in Minneapolis. We are an organization that focuses basically in Latino economic development, helping small business especially to learn how to do a business, what regulations they need to do, helping immigrants to figure out how to work with local regulations about licensing or anything, taxes, whatever they need to have, and development to do business. So that's what Latino Economic Development Center specializes on and has done for many years. We have a large agricultural program or a growing agricultural program that is focusing in helping entrepreneurship in the agricultural sector area. But we are a statewide organization, has been mostly towards the Twin Cities, but we're developing more and more in other areas. Right now, I am particularly working with a project with the Initiative Foundation of Little Falls, focused in central Minnesota to provide extra support and COVID relief to immigrant families in this area that has been disparately affected by COVID. So we are extending a little bit more about not only economic development of business, but we are working with workforce development, and we're also working with families during this time, just when providing aid and additional resources that they might be needing as a result of COVID.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that, and I actually wanted to learn more about your COVID response. I recently read an article from, I believe it was the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs, which disclosed the fact that the infection rate, the COVID infection rate in the Latino community is 5 times what it is in the white community. And I'm wondering, how are you seeing that with the communities that you serve, with your clients, and why is that the case?
Well, in the area where I am working, we have about 3 packing plants where we have a large labor force that are Latino community. We saw sparks of COVID in the Latino community in early March, before everybody else was really March and April, before everybody else was really aware or rethinking about COVID. So we saw that in the Latino communities in these rural areas, and that was one of the main reasons, because of the proximity and the way that they were working in these industries. We have a lot of manufacturers around here that are also places where many of Latino families are employed. We also are working with agricultural workers, people that work in what they call the ranchos, dairies and other places. Not all of these places are up to date in PPE equipment, and there are many struggles around that. Not everybody provides equipment or let people or are enforcing regulations the way that we are supposed to be enforcing them.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that, and there has been historically around this area not a lot of effort in information that is culturally appropriate, or even in Spanish for people, and there are a large population of immigrant families around here. So that's another factor that includes there is misinformation, and there is there has been not targeted efforts with this community. In the bright side of it, because of COVID and because these disparities have existed for a while, but COVID has exacerbated everything, exacerbated a lot more. So we are actually seeing more resources and being put to help these communities that we did not see before. So in the bright side, I would say that my position, for example, is through this collaboration with the Initiative Foundation of Little Falls that have, and the Center for Disasters and Philanthropy that have put resources in developing this position and having us working specifically with this population.
Well, that's encouraging news. It's my understanding that there are approximately 300,000 Minnesotans of Latino descent. Is that correct?
That is, according to the census information. We do believe that there are a lot more that are unreported, people that are not being part of the census, yes.
Mm-hmm. So among that population, is food security a concern right now? Is food security a concern in the Latino community here in Minnesota?
Yes, it is. Food security has always been an issue. I will say that in some of the assessment that I have been doing when I have been working with families, one of the programs that we have trying to reach out to families to take advantage of is the housing program that is happening through Minnesota for housing assistance through the state. And what we have found doing actually outreach for that program is that families do pay rent before anything else. So being that housing is not because it's not issue, housing is an issue, but it's such an issue for Latino families that they don't want to risk it. So because they don't want to risk it for any reason, they have not been, we have found some families that are really struggling, that are behind rents and bills. However, many families that are struggling are not behind rents and bills because they will put their funding towards that before some other needs. One of those needs is food. So they will be affected in food. They will be eating less quality of meals, or they have been looking for reducing how they do it, or being able to pay other things. So that's one of the pieces about food security. Then after that, I will say medical bills is the other one that is get put aside and for the next priority. But food security is that. But food security is more than just people being hungry. So it's a way of being. Many of immigrant families that don't. So when you are in a new place and you're not familiar with the culture and anything, many of the old connections that you have, the only connections that you have where come from, come through food. Also through families, food is also a way of sharing, is a way of being together, is a way of showing love to your loved ones. So is very important. I used to work for a nonprofit locally in St. Cloud before, and I was in connection with the food shelf of this organization. And then one of the things that we will see different in immigrant families than local families is that immigrant families do cook more than local families. So in food shelves, you usually find a lot of canned foods or prepared meals. And that's not the best solution for immigrant families, because cooking is such an important piece of, well, for one, it's cheaper, or it has been cheaper, at least in our countries. But to get a better quality of meal that you cook yourself, is culturally, but it's also a way that you show love to loved ones, preparing a good meal that they're going to like. And especially during these times of Christmas, there are so many meals, pieces, meal dishes that people want to share, that are looking forward to it. So it is part of the mental health as well.
Interesting connection. Well, I'm interested in learning a little bit more now about how Greater Minneapolis Community Connections supports food security in the Latino community. I'm wondering, Adrienne, if you can tell us a little bit more about this network of 300 food shelves and how it's made available to the community.
What was the impetus behind our connection with Monica on the Latino Economic Development Group was that we were granted, because of our longstanding relationships with food shelves all across Minnesota, we were granted a significant grant from a local family foundation to re-grant specifically to rural food shelves, or efforts that were supporting food security for rural Minnesotans, because the foundation because of COVID, we're really anticipating that was going to be a significant area that needed to be addressed. However, at the time, what we were hearing from our food shelf partners in rural Minnesota was that funding wasn't actually the biggest challenge at that moment in time, right when COVID started. Because as a matter of fact, a lot of these food shelves were receiving an influx of grants and relief funding, but the challenge was that they were having a difficult time finding supplies. They were having a difficult time accessing protein, fresh produce. They could really only get their hands on dried goods. Meanwhile, we were reading articles in newspaper, as everyone was, about processing plants that were being closed due to COVID, and farmers that were having to euthanize and bury pigs and chickens, and also dump a lot of produce because they were sourcing restaurants that were now closed. And so what we saw was this pretty immediate food supply challenge that, of course, is very relevant to rural Minnesota. And we partnered up with the Initiative Foundation to do a sort of what we called a sprint, because it was really fast and furious almost, that where we got together some farmers and producers and food researchers, food shelf volunteers and staff in Region 5. In order to sort of talk about, well, what's going on here? Who has what and where is what needed? And how can we partner and collaborate to make sure that food is getting where it needs to go? And then, of course, the needs have ebbed and flowed when the like kind of initial influx of funding ran out, when the food shelves were seeing an increase in usage after the weekly unemployment benefits ran out. And also we're seeing people who had never used a food shelf before needing to start accessing food shelves. And so while we are not necessarily specifically focused on the Latinx community, there is a large Latinx community in that Region 5. And so that's how we started to really understand that there were needs, as Monica is describing, and for culturally specific foods. And so we wanted to support not just the long-standing food shelves, but also we wanted to pay attention to maybe new food distribution efforts that were popping up in response to COVID that really were playing a significant role in helping to address food access for rural communities.
Speaking of food access for rural communities, I learned on your website that one of your partners is also Sprout Minnesota, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how they factor into this support that you're providing for our rural food shelves.
Yeah, so Sprout is a food hub and marketplace located in Little Falls, and they were actually our primary partner, and for this sprint that I'm describing, where we brought folks together. Sprout is very connected in Region 5, has a very important role that they're playing there as far as partnering with farmers and addressing food security. They have a really amazing CSA program where they do free CSA boxes for families that need it. And so that was our primary partner, where we got together and said, who are the farmers that we should bring to the table? Who are the food shelf volunteers and staff that we should bring to the table to talk about what's going on here, so that we weren't just addressing sort of this immediate urgent need for food, but also what's going on kind of behind the scenes, and how can we kind of partner and adjust in order to really improve the situation for everybody.
That's very nimble and adaptive. Is that atypical in food security initiatives? I'm surprised to hear how quickly you can react to what you're learning from the ground.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I will say that I think that the food shelf is a very old model. And I think that there are people who have worked very, very hard for many, many decades. And some of them were engaged in this month-long kind of project that we did, and just done some amazing work in food security, especially in Region 5. However, I do think that there's an opportunity here to sort of turn the food shelf model on its head. And something else that Monica was sort of alluding to was that it's not just about food. I mean, food affects everything else too. It's about what food symbolizes, but it's also, you know, if someone is food insecure and you provide food, that doesn't solve all the problems. I mean, if there's food insecurity problems, there's likely to be access to education problems and equity and housing problems. And so one of the things that we're doing at GMCC is, one, really making sure that in all of our initiatives and efforts, we're really looking at the whole family, and that we're approaching it from the needs of the whole family, and also that we're really being responsive to community, and that we don't think about our work as serving community. We think about it as co-designing with community and building with our partners, building something that's responsive. And so I do think that there is an opportunity to sort of reimagine the food shelf and the food shelf's role as we struggle through these last several months of COVID and moving forward in the future.
Interesting. Well, one of the ways in which our viewers can really understand the impact of your work is if we can hear a story of someone that has benefited directly from your services. So Monica, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us about someone from greater Minnesota who's directly benefited from your entrepreneur program or your business development program or any aspect of the Latino Economic Development Center?
Business owners are also very, very ready to help and ready to help with other families and other people there. So business owners have helped us to do distribution, to be a site for distributions, but have also helped us to reach out to community. And they are leaders in the community, and they help us to, they know who is struggling more than others. They have those intimate conversations with families. Business owners or people, leaders in the communities, are the ones that actually carry the deep of end of the story that you're looking for. They are the ones who tell me about so and so that received this help with tears in their eyes, that I sometimes don't get to experience that. So the local people that are connected with the families are the people that explain to me who is who and what do they need to. They talk about the single mother that is trying to get them in, and please just don't leave this person out of your list. Just keep them there. This is the need that they have. We do have also efforts that happen within the community. One story that happens in the Melrose area is that the community, the Latino community, they have a group which is the Knights of Columbus. And they, the Latino side of the Knights of Columbus decided to do as their faith effort through the Lent area, which was kind of towards the time that COVID was kind of impacted a lot. They found food, they donated food themselves, and they built a pantry themselves. And they distributed that pantry to families that were affected by COVID. So they will have their own distribution ways. They will put the food in baskets and they would bring it to the door of the people that they knew had been quarantined or were with COVID, and they left it at the doorsteps and they left. And that was their faith way to contribute. What they did through their faith, and because it was Lent, but it also a way that they contributed. It was really at the right moment, because that was the moment that many Latino families got infected, and they were there. So those are some of the examples that I'm finding about.
Well, that's fantastic, Monica. I really appreciate you sharing that. And unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left here, and I want to make sure that I ask you both a couple more questions. One of which is, you're obviously both doing important, critical work in our communities, but I'm wondering if there's something that the public sector is not doing that necessitates your work. In other words, is there some public sector deficiency that you would like to see addressed? And do you advocate for any public policies? Briefly.
Historically, our program, Minnesota Food Share, has done some work in partnership with Hunger Solutions and some other advocacy organizations at the Capitol. But I think that the big answer to your question is yes, absolutely. There's a deficiency. I mean, we have a real problem with systemic inequity. And you know, there's what we are doing now is, and have been doing for a long time pre-COVID, isn't working, and inequities in Minnesota are huge and getting worse. And so, you know, nonprofits are looked to come in and fill the gap. But I mean, I don't think that that's the right solution. And I don't think that's a long-term solution. And that's also part of the reason why in our work, we understand that there are immediate relief efforts that are needed. I mean, people need food now and people need to eat every day. At the same time, we look at, well, what can we do to try to make it so that in the future, the people don't need that food from us every day, that there's a big enough holistic change that we can start addressing these equity gaps. And I mean, that's a lot for just the nonprofit sector to try to figure out.
Mm-hmm. So I want to follow up with that very briefly. If your organization were to accomplish its mission and become irrelevant, what would Minnesota look like, Adrienne?
I think that people wouldn't be struggling with food insecurity in the way that they certainly are in unprecedented ways during COVID, but really always have, and that we wouldn't have these, you know, really troubling and gaping inequity gaps.
Monica, I want to end with you, and I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about what motivates you to do the work that you do, and what can your neighbors in Minnesota do in order to help foster an equitable community?
what motivates me is definitely the people that I get to interact with. I see people every day, all day, that they wanted to do their work, they wanted to do it right, and they wanted to do it safely. In terms of policy and what you asked, Adrienne, earlier, definitely we need more oversight over workplaces in rural areas. There is very lack of oversight, and there are illegal things that happen in these workplaces, beyond PPP equipment. To really, I have had people that have told me that their boss told them who to vote for, and that's that happens, and that people don't get asked to this. There are so many, also so very little opportunities for immigrant families to change their workplace, that they will not denounce this. They will not denounce it because they won't raise their jobs. So in terms of policy oversight, external oversight is important, and maybe changing the ways that you need to have somebody to put their face and everything in front to be able to have an investigation. Got to be more proactive than that. And in terms of what other Minnesotans can do, I will say observe better. Observe better what happens with our immigrant families, and assume less, ask questions. There are, in terms of food and how they use food, when we talk about food, there is a lot of oversight of people about, oh, okay, we gave food to this person and they were not hungry. What are they doing with that food? Why do they get this? And I don't think that there is people getting free food that really don't need it. There is that they might, I mean, even if you see, I mean, we didn't talk about overweight people. We have overweight people in our communities, but it's because they're eating empty calories, not because they didn't have, not because they have a really good meals on it. And it's not about that. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's so much more that we could discuss, and I really hope we have an opportunity to do so again. But I want to thank you both for your work, and thank you so much for joining the conversation too. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us once again. This has been a segment of Moving Lives Minnesota, Stories of Origin and Migration. I'm Jason Edens, your host of Lakeland Currents. Thanks for joining us today. Be kind, be well. We'll see you next week.
Moving Lives Minnesota is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people, November 4th, 2008.